Before we get into this video, I wanted to start off with a kind of warning. If you are currently dealing with death or grief in any form, this is probably not the video you need to watch right now. I myself was put into a pretty gloomy mood while making this video, and I know people have commented on my videos before who are dealing with the loss of a loved one, and you're absolutely free to do whatever you want. I just want you to be aware of what you're getting into with this video. It is a bit of a downer. If your world is falling apart around you, then my philosophy is that there is no need to watch anything that is going to make you feel worse. This video and this art that we're going to discuss is meant to remind us, when life is good, that hard, dark times are coming. If you're already in those times, then this video is just a blaring alarm clock to someone who's already awake. Memento Mori means remember that you will die. And many of us need to be reminded of this, but many of us do not. For many people, death is a reality that is all too present. And an unhealthy obsession or exposure to death is just that, unhealthy. And I do agree with John Milton that knowledge is like food. We have to be moderate with it and consume what is good for us at the right time. And with that being said, if the rest of you masochists are ready to have your day ruined, let's just dive right into it. What if I told you that there was an artist whose specialty was making sculptures of decaying human corpses with rotting flesh and even maggots? You might consider that very avant-garde, very fringe, very weird, and a bit crazy. Or what if you go over to your neighbor's house one day to get some butter because you're making brownies and like a dang fool you ain't got no butter, and your neighbor says, "Sure, come on in, I got all the butter you need," but once you step inside you see that his walls are decorated with pictures of human skulls. You might think that's pretty dark, pretty satanic or something like that, making you think twice about that satanic butter. And you might be correct on all counts, especially if we were talking about artists working today. But the art I'm talking about is actually Christian art that was made during the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and the Enlightenment. And this might surprise us, because today religious people don't usually make art out of death, and even fairly mainstream, well-adjusted secular people don't do that. And yet once upon a time, it was relatively mainstream. It seems to be generally true that anytime you encounter a religion, you find at some point within its vast and complex framework of metaphysics, morality, and rituals, a place in that framework that seeks to come to terms in some way with death, and to remind people of the basic fact that someday they will die. And when you encounter a culture that has become religious, you will find artistic representations of these metanarratives of life and death, beginning and end, and the nature of reality. I've mentioned Buddhist sand mandalas in my video on Unus Annus. And other cultures have their own artistic expressions. For example, the Japanese have death poems, and Mexican culture has the Day of the Dead, of course. Such artifacts and festivals of this nature are found all around the world. But in this video, I want to focus on European art, because I find it particularly strange and gruesome. And I'm actually going to split this topic into two videos. In the rest of this video, I'm going to discuss Vanitas Paintings, and in the next video, I'm going to talk about cadaver monuments. A Vanitas painting is a painting that highlights the transitory nature of the things or people that it portrays, in order to remind us of the brevity of life and bring us into greater harmony with the nature of reality, which, for human beings, is fleeting. The term vanitas comes from the Latin translation of the Hebrew book of Ecclesiastes, which translates the Hebrew word for breath, hebel, as vanitas, which many English translations render as the word vanity. All is vanity, says Ecclesiastes. Everything is like breath. And this Hebrew word hebel is pregnant with meaning and can indicate that everything is meaningless, or that everything is obscure or mysterious, or that everything is absurd, or that everything is as brief as a single human breath. And for our purposes, we'll focus on the latter meaning. In these relatively tame examples, a bubble is used as a symbol of the temporary. To me, these paintings are more sad than horrifying, partly because they often depict children, and partly because the symbol of the bubble is such a poignant symbol of fun and play, and a reminder that such things will not last very long. Sometimes flowers are used, either wilting or yet to wilt, to evoke more of a sense of the shortness of beauty rather than the shortness of play. A quite poignant example is this painting, which is believed to be a self-portrait by Clara Peters. In addition to the floating bubble, one of her flowers has already begun to droop. Of course, the most popular and memorable symbol of vanity is the human skull. Notice how this painting combines all three symbols into one, right alongside symbols of royalty, time, and the whole world. The globe is another popular symbol in these still life paintings, indicating the vanity of the whole world, an idea which is also impressed on us by the sheer amount of objects heaped into these paintings. To dissect the symbolism in each object would take quite some time. The volume of objects alone can indicate how easy it is to become distracted by all of these things in life. Here, the skull is hiding in the background, behind all of the distractions. It's surprising and unexpected when we do see it, as death most often is. The end of pleasure is represented often by silent musical instruments, or scattered playing cards, pipes, or empty upended goblets. People don't leave their empty cups like this, unless they've been taken by surprise, suddenly snatched away by something. The vanity of wealth is symbolized with jewels or coins, and the brevity and emptiness of knowledge itself is symbolized with books. I quite like these stagings with the skull set atop books or art folios, the death head on top of the artist's body of work, so to speak, implying that the artist's work, like the skull of the person on top of it, will eventually pass away. An awareness which is conveyed in one of my favorite self-portraits done by Peter Klaus, where his own reflection, at work on a brilliant piece of art, looks back at us on the surface of a bubble. It's very surreal and very powerful. It's worth bearing in mind that these paintings would likely be displayed in a person's home. These were not for churches or public spaces, but for private houses, which is a bit morose, but it also reflects an everyday symbolic sophistication that I think is largely lacking in our modern world. Our homes, our dwelling places, are not as symbolically rich and layered as even pagan dwellings with household gods. And this brings us to another one of my favorite paintings, of which there are many. Here we leave the world of still life and enter the world of portraiture, where we see what at first appears to be a pretty wholesome painting by standards of the 17th century. The fact that this family has included their presumably enslaved servant in this painting is interesting in itself and deserves another video. But despite that, everything else seems quite normal. Everyone is doing their thing and having a grand old time. But then our eyes wander upward, and we see upon the mantle a bust of Death himself, with the inscription, Discite Mori, learn to die. Learn to let it all go, even if only for a little while. Those Christians no doubt believed that there would be another reunion such as this on the other side of death, so long as they learned to die in Christ. And that's the painter himself there within the painting, Jan Steen, reminding us that sometimes artists paint their own portraits with symbols of vanity, as we've already seen with Clara Peters and Peter Klaus. Another one of my favorite, lesser-known painters is Michael Svertz. Here he portrays himself pointing to a skull, as does this painter whose name I'm not sure how to pronounce. But to me, the most compelling of the skull portraits is this one by Frans Hals, who portrays a young man, not the artist himself, holding a skull. Unlike others who draw attention to the skull, looking grim and very clearly trying to teach us a serious lesson, this boy seems almost unaware of the skull that he is holding. He goes on talking, not to us, but to someone out of view, seemingly as unaware of the fact of death in his hands, as most of us are, going about our daily lives. This idea is similarly portrayed in two paintings by Judith Leister. The first painting is a rather innocuous depiction of three young men embarking on an evening of revelry. It's not until we look at the second painting that the first seems darker than we realized. In the second painting, there is still a merry trio, but there's just something a little different about the third figure, unbeknownst, of course, to the other two. And if you think that's dark, just wait till next week.